With global trade tensions on the rise and the possibility of a full-blown trade war, many retirees are feeling the heat. Join us this week as we explore how trade conflicts can impact your retirement savings and the proactive strategies you can employ to protect your nest egg.
Welcome to Label on Fire with Label Sternbach, the financial independence and retirement show dedicated to helping you build the life of your dreams as fast as possible with as little stress as possible. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for Label on Fire.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Label on Fire. I'm Freddie Bell, and with me is Label Sternbach. He's Amazon's best-selling author of Living with Financial Anxiety and the book entitled Authenticity. Label, it's good to have you back and welcome to the program.
Hey, how you doing today?
Unbelievable. So good to be with you, and a lot of things are happening, and I'm wondering if we can get just right into it because we don't have a lot of time, but we have a lot of content to cover today. Trade wars, as we mentioned in the open, can ripple throughout our global economy, impacting everything from the stock market to inflation. What are the specific economic risks that retirees face if a trade war escalates? And companion to that, how might increased tariffs and disrupted supply chains impact our fixed income and equity investments label?
Yeah, I mean, those are great questions, and they're ones that we're getting all the time now from people wondering, what the impact is. And you hear all these people on the news talking about it. And then you've got Trump going on stage and he's saying, well, they got it all wrong, right? This is not how it's going to work. So we'll peel back the onion one layer at a time. And honestly, right, we don't care how it's going to affect whole swatches of the economy, right? They're not us. What matters is how is it going to impact our lifestyle? How is it going to impact our ability to retire and stay retired? And that's what we're going to focus on when we talk about this. So let's talk about trade war, and then we'll talk about tariffs. So a trade war is, when one country goes to, instead of having a shooting war, we have an economic war where essentially there's always this give and take between economies, where some economies they import more than they export. Some have more tourism than others. And the entire idea is that what you want to have is that you are bringing in wealth from other nations, right, into your own. So you're bringing dollars from the residents of other countries into your own, and you're bringing in more than you're sending out, right? Because naturally, everyone can't produce everything, right? We're not a closed economic system. We're not a closed ecological system, right? We need to, buy strawberries and bananas and, all kinds of fruits and vegetables from across the world, right? That's how we get to have strawberries 12 months out of the year. We buy things from places where they're better at producing them and cheaper at producing them, and we bring them here, and it's cheaper for us, right? If we produced everything that we consumed, it would be really expensive, right? Because when you look at kind of like the global cost of living and the global level of living that people have, the United States is kind of near the top as our quality of life. And if everyone had our quality of life, and it would be very expensive. And so we benefit greatly from the fact that we're raising up other nations. We're raising up their cost, their quality of life. And we benefit from that in terms of our cost of living is cheaper, right? Cheaper than if an American was producing your shoes and your shirts and everything that you consumed. So when we talk about a trade war, is essentially one nation or both nations getting into this tit for tat match where we are trying to strike a balance where we're trying to renegotiate the balance, that economic imbalance where one nation is importing more than the other, right? More of the other nation's wealth. And that is fundamentally the purpose of a trade war, is that one nation comes along and says, you know what, this trade balance that we have, we're not okay with the status quo. We're not okay with the fact that we're giving you more of our wealth than we're receiving, and they're seeking to rebalance that. The problem is that with any war, there's a lot of uncertainties, right? How will the other side react? how will the dominoes kind of fall into place? And so the threat to us as, as people who are living off of their nest egg, right, as retirees, the threat that we have to be the most concerned about is how is it going to impact our ability to retire and stay retired. And it's most going to really going to impact our cost of living, right? It's heating and cooling and food and gas and the cost to replace our cars when they break down or fix that, replace the thermostat, right? We had a chip shortage a while ago, right? And it was hard to get chips, but, everything that we use comes from somewhere else or has parts that come from somewhere else. And so that is the real concern that we have to worry about.
Everyone, we're talking with Label Sternbach, and I'm just wondering, as you mentioned, certain sectors like technology, manufacturing, and agriculture could be hit harder during a trade conflict. So, Label, how can retirees assess which parts of their portfolio are most vulnerable and rebalance accordingly? And with that, are there asset classes that might serve as, a safe haven during such turbulent times as we are expected to go into?
Yeah, so those bring up interesting questions of how do you identify what's going to get impacted by this trade war? And we can talk in theory and economics and take a step back and pretend it's all cold facts and logic. And I can give you all the theories of who will be impacted and how they'll be impacted, right? But we've got a very big unknown in our world today, which is Trump. And Trump doesn't follow the rules, right? And so normally when you have an economic war, right, economists are very good about saying, well, if you do X, then Y happens. And then if Y happens and Z happens, you get this chain of effect. And everyone knows that chain of effect is going to happen. But what happens when somebody doesn't react the way that you expect people to react, the way that the world and all the cold logic says you should react, and all of a sudden you have an unknown, right? Your A doesn't equal B and doesn't equal C. And that is, in a lot of ways, the power that Trump wields, is that nobody knows what his next move is going to be. Nobody knows if what he's doing is proportionate or not, or if he's going to respond proportionately. And so it forces other players to deal with him at face value instead of trying to play this negotiating game. And whether you like him or hate him, the fact is that this is the world that we're stuck in for the next 4 years, right? Or at least until the cheeseburgers catch up. So we got to play with the hands that we're dealt. And when we look at our investments and when we look at really, I think investment-wise, it's very difficult to predict what will be impacted, right? When you can see it in the stock market, Trump gets on the news and the market goes up 2-3%. Next day he gets on the news and it's down 1-2%. Nobody really knows what's going to get impacted. Nobody knows whether it's a negotiating tool or it's something that he actually wants to implement because he wants to implement it or he has a bigger plan. And there are some very smart people in Washington who are not part of the political ecosystem. They're not part of the swamp that helped Trump get elected. And they are very much behind the scenes, proponents of these policies, creating these policies. And so there is some thought process to what they're doing that has never been done before. And so it's also something that's very difficult to model and say, well, last time we had a trade war, this is what happened. This trade war is not like any other trade war that's happened before. This president is not like any other president that's happened before. And the world stage is not like how it's been before. So you kind of got to throw the rule book out and focus on the essentials, right? You got to focus on, okay, what in my world can I control? And you really need to focus on having a sound financial plan that says, well, regardless of what happens in the next 3 years, I know that, the money that I'm going to live off of, I know the things that I need, those essentials are protected and they're not really tied to the market, right? So to answer your question, right, how do you protect yourself? Right? You protect yourself by, number one, making sure that your finances are kind of decoupled from all of this chaos. Right. And at the same time, you make sure that your long-term money has an ability to participate, right? Because the last time Trump was president, the market produced 14% annualized returns, which the market typically does 10%, right? So that's 4% greater on a year-over-year basis. So you want to participate in that if it happens.
Makes sense. So it sounds like you're also talking about diversification. How critical is that in our portfolios?
Something that I think that's worth pointing out is that for the last 25 years, the United States and the European markets, when you look at the stock markets, they've kind of moved in alignment. And so you didn't really get diversification by holding international and by holding what was considered to be a diversified portfolio. But for the first time in 25 years, the European economy and the euro is moving differently than the United States, right? We are seeing right now an economic boom. Are we on the verge of a recession, or are we on an economic expansion, right? Only time will tell. But whatever it is, the outlooks for the United States economy are much better than what everyone has for the European economy. And that's partially because of Putin. That's partially because of the energy crisis in Europe, partially because of kind of the European Union, and that European project is falling apart to a very real extent. And you've got the fall of Syria, which it took 11 years to happen, and you had all these refugees flooding into Europe, and they've changed the landscape of the European economy and the European culture. And you're seeing a rise of far right parties that are trying to bring back and trying to undo a lot of the last 25 years.
Before we have to step away, can you talk about the tax implications because of what's going on right now? Is there a way that we can buttress this?
Yeah. So when it comes to taxes, you really got to think short term, and you got to think long term, because we got to keep our eye on what these economic policies, whether it's a trade war, which leads to inflation, or maybe it leads to deflation or stagflation, which is happening in some parts of the world. We got to keep an eye on how that's affecting the United States. We need to keep our eye on the flow of dollars, right? Is it coming into U.S. Treasuries, or is it leaving U.S. Treasuries and going back to their home countries? And then interest rates, because that's going to impact where taxes have to go in the United States. The United States has to pay for all these programs, and we've got a lot of line items in the budget. And as much as Elon Musk wants to, trim $2 trillion from the budget, there's only so much that you can take away. And the question is going to be, where's those tax dollars going to come from? And you got to look at your own purse strings, right? You've got to look at what am I selling in order to raise the money that I need to live off of in retirement, and what's the tax impact of that? And is it cheaper for me to do it now or in the future when taxes go up? Don't forget, this year, the tax code is set to expire, right? With everything that's going on, Trump still needs to rally Congress to either renew or create a new tax code. And we'll see what happens, right? Because if he fails to make that happen, then we're going to revert to the old tax code, and nobody wants that to happen.
In the few seconds we have left, is any of this information at yieldsforyou.com?
Yeah, yieldsforyou.com. You can find more information about this. We've also got a whole bunch of tools to help you see and plan so that you can see, okay, stress test your portfolio, stress test different financial situations, and see how they'll impact your financial security. We got a 60-second retirement plan where you put in a bunch of information, and we'll then project out for a good best case, worst case scenario, so you get an idea of just how much margin of safety you have in your plan, and whether you need to be more conservative and more aggressive in your investments. And then we've recently launched some ETFs that kind of fit into that as well. So whether you hire us, hire another financial advisor, or just hire us through ETFs, we're there to help you through this journey.
Thank you, Label. That's all the time we have for this week's episode on protecting your retirement from a trade war. And remember, while the global landscape might be unpredictable, and some say that it is, proactive planning and diversification can go a long way toward safeguarding your financial future.
If you would like to see how the Yields for You team can help you get off the Wall Street roller coaster and save you money on taxes so you can live the life of your dreams, book an appointment online at yieldsforyou.com or call 410-914-4894.
Yields for You is a registered investment advisor in the state of New York and only transacts business in states where the firm is properly registered or is excluded or exempted from registration requirements. Registration as an investment advisor is not an endorsement. Information presented on this program is believed to be factual and up to date, but we do not guarantee its accuracy, and it should not be regarded as a complete analysis of the subjects discussed. Discussion should not be construed as an offer to buy or sell, or solicitation of any offer to buy or sell the investments mentioned. Annuity guarantees are subject to the claims paying ability of the issuing insurance company. Content should not be viewed as legal or tax advice. Always consult an attorney or tax professional regarding your specific legal or tax situation.